Welcome to Basementside Chats. I'm your host, Deeg, also known as Greg in the real world. I'm here with my friends, Will, aka Dubs, and Taylor, also known as BadLuck. How are you, gentlemen?
Good.
I am doing just good
Good to
today.
know.
Here.
What are we here to talk about, gents?
Woohoo, Destiny. Yeah.
Right.
A crappy game.
Oh, getting started all positive.
A game that people love, but I don't know why.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just what you need to realize, man.
They should share my boredom and bland feelings towards this game.
Yeah, because everyone who doesn't agree with you doesn't know what they're doing, basically, right?
Thank you. End of podcast.
That's all, folks.
God, man,
Thanks for visiting
glad
us
we
today.
got that wrapped up so quickly.
So
God.
efficient.
Figured it out fast. So what is there to talk about now?
Well, what we might talk about is we, in the first week that we actually sat down to talk, you, Taylor, myself, and Matt, we talked about our favorite and most disappointing games of the last decade, and a chunk of that we devoted to talking about Destiny. When we had that talk, I shared my thought that I really wanted to love Destiny, but at the end of the day, it kind of let me down, and some reasons why. We bantered it back and forth. Will, I know you since have gone back and listened to some of that. Will, before we get started, why don't you remind us, because the three of us, me, Matt, and Taylor, are not Destiny veterans at all. You, though, have a lot of experience in this game. Tell us a little bit about how you came to Destiny and what you're getting out of it today.
All right. First of all, I was just a big fan of Bungie. They did Halo, loved Halo, played Halo to death. I was just waiting for the next thing to come out. When they started previewing Destiny, I actually really thought, I was like, hey, this is really cool. Let's do this. Let's do some of this. And they were talking about how they wanted to implement MMO style progressions and things like that. And it really interested me. I started playing in the beta of D1, and I've been playing ever since.
Oh, so nice and early.
Yeah, very early. Titan from the start, so that's my class of choice. And yeah, what is a Titan? It's basically just Master Chief that can punch things really hard. I mean, if you want to, get down to brass tacks. But
It's basically the warrior equivalent if you're used to fantasy RPGs.
yeah, or you could equivalent. The equivalent could be like a tank. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So there's the Titan, who's kind of like a warrior or a tank. There's the Warlock, who's kind of like a caster, like a healer or a mage. And then there's the Hunter, which is kind of like a rogue or a ranger kind of idea, right?
Yes, that would be a very good analogy there. Bungie didn't exactly capture those specific classes, but that was the mold they used. Yes.
I interrupted you. What were you? You had more to say about your Bungie veteranship?
Oh, I didn't have more to say about that, but just to answer his secondary question, like what I get out of it now. Now that we're in the Destiny 2 era, or much further, this is I can't even think. What were we? 5-6 years later. Um, I have a good close clan that I talk to and play with. We do all the raids when there's new content out. We jump into it, and it's become kind of a community thing for me. And I know that Deej, you specifically talked about how you didn't feel that. I feel it with my clan. I
Yeah, I
got
actually
something out of
played
it
with
that
you
you didn't.
guys
Yeah,
for a little while.
yeah, you did. Yeah, you did play with us a little bit, and they're not the most fuzzy, cuddly group, but I like playing with them. I think that in every community you can find assholes, but I have to say that when it comes down to the Destiny community as a whole, I think they're great. I get on Reddit a lot. I look in the forums there, and anytime there's some guy who posts like, "Hey, I have trouble getting through this thing," or I have trouble going through the raid," half the comments on there are like, "Hey, what platform are you on? Let's see if my clan can get you through. Hey, what platform are you on?" That over and over, and I like seeing that, and that's one reason why I've kind of stuck with it. Is that even when I didn't have a clan to play with, there were still people online like, "Hey, let's get you through this content. Let's play." So yeah.
It seems to have successfully created a super duper active community, which is definitely a big mark in its favor. You were telling me, Will, when we were kind of just talking out this podcast as a potential idea about an event that recently happened in Destiny where the community came together to solve a big puzzle relating to a big lore figure and an exotic weapon, right?
Yes. I guess we'll go into some spoilers here. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't been following Destiny lately. They had the Corridors of Time mission. It just dropped you in there. You had rooms with symbols next to doors, and you had to pick a door. And if you picked the wrong door, you just kept on going in loops and loops and loops. Eventually, the community figured out that if you go through on a certain pattern, you'll get lore entries. If you go through on another pattern, you'll get an emblem. And from after that, it evolved into this huge thing where I wish I'd read up on this a little bit more after our conversation because now I'm going to explain it very terribly live. But um, there were symbols underneath the floor in the final room. Like after you've navigated and gotten to the very end, you'd see symbols beneath the floor. The community took those symbols and created a whole new path and then figured out a 30 room, 30 symbol pattern that eventually got you to the very end, got you to the lore that was at the very end, and also, you know, gave you the exotic bastion, I believe. Yeah. So
Which
Is
is a
Corridors of
weapon.
Time, is that an allusion to Chrono Trigger, or is that just coincidentally named?
I didn't play Chrono Trigger, so I don't know. Knowing Bungie, it probably is. They like to reference a lot of outside things. Also, while Corridors of Time was going on, they were posting stuff. There was like posts on the old Marathon websites that corresponded with what was going on, and like looked to give little hints about what was going on in the Corridors of Time. So as a developer, Bungie, they'll go the extra mile to kind of give you these little hints sometimes. It'd be nice if that translated into other parts of the game, but you know, you can only ask for so much.
Go on.
Oh, you want me to talk more that I'm bad mouthing them a little bit? No.
Yeah.
I would say the
Yes, give
biggest
into your
deal as a
hatred.
as a Destiny fan, the biggest deal is that they are always so close to greatness, and that's the frustrating part. They do one thing right, and then they'll do two things wrong. You know, one step forward, two step back, and that just seems to be kind of an ongoing problem with them. Whether that's management or just I don't know, lack of people, lack of the right type of creative minds. I don't know. I don't know personally, and there's not a lot of blame going. I don't see the blame a lot in the community, but it Destiny is always on the verge of greatness, and
So
that's the
that's a good
frustrating part.
way to describe it from how I
Yeah.
remember playing it, and I think Greg would agree with that since he describes it as plastic.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's a game, it's clearly got the budget behind it because it's a responsive shooter. It's a
Yes.
beautiful shooter. It's a
Yes.
great sounding shooter. The lore in single player is garbage, but despite all of what I can agree is very strong about it, there was just there was nothing that made me want to continue playing beyond the 5 hour campaign. And even that 5 hour campaign, I was just doing it because I felt like I had to.
Well, Taylor, if I know anything about you, you have an aversion to grinding. Yes or no?
For the most part, yeah. It I mean, I have to feel like it I don't know, I don't want to say has a purpose because it's video games and ultimately it doesn't ever have a purpose because it only remains in that game. But like I've been playing Sekiro that I keep talking about, and I'm 60 hours into that game, and I'm intentionally going everywhere and fighting every boss that I can find, which there's no reason to do. It's just really fun.
You enjoy the game, you want more out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you would never
Uh,
kill that boss over and over and over again if they had a 2% chance of dropping an item that you wanted.
No.
Right.
okay. Yeah. Then did you play Borderlands at all and enjoy that?
I played Borderlands 2 a lot,
Yeah.
and I did enjoy it, but I think it's because, and this kind of goes into what you said earlier, I think it's because of who I played it with that I enjoyed it.
That's a good possibility.
And you were
I mean,
saying
the
the
looter
social
shooter might
aspect.
not be in your the looter shooter just might not be in your wheelhouse. Is what I'm saying. Is what I'm thinking.
Right. Well, also Borderlands has a lot of it has a lot going for it. Its humor is great, but it's
Yes.
also, it's beautiful, it sounds great, the gameplay feels
Yeah,
pretty
Borderlands
good.
is a very easy to like single player game if you want to play it that way. Whereas Destiny from the get go really says, hey, I'm an MMO. I want you to, you know, have incremental stat upgrades and power levels and weapon drops. I mean, there's weapon drops in Borderlands too, but the difference between the weapons is a lot more apparent in something like Borderlands than it is in like Destiny,
Yeah.
where for a new player, the differences between an auto rifle and an SMG might be pretty hard to understand. They're pretty subtle compared to this does weird floaty explodey things and this does big zappy things, which you might get out of a Borderlands kind of weapon.
Right. I do remember being confused by the weapons and not confused, but the number's higher, so this means better. That's about all I could ever notice
Yeah.
from the weapons in Destiny.
Yeah, I think if I could kind of respond to what you were saying a few minutes ago, Taylor, about my impression of Destiny, I did use the word plastic to describe it. And the reason I use that word is because it is a good feeling, a good looking game that just feels like it's made out of something flimsy. Like it creates a flimsy experience. I, I like shooters. I have the old, I have the Team Fortress Classic kind of competitive scene in my history, but I also spent a lot of years playing games like World of Warcraft. So I really like RPGs like that create cool social experiences. And if I'm gonna invest in a game like Destiny that's an MMO, I want to have cool social experiences. I want to have um, kind of loot that drives certain experiences in the game that make me want to group up with my clan, that make me want to coordinate with them, that make me want to set up my character in a certain way to complement someone else I play with. Um, and I want to get excited about the stuff that we're pursuing. So, like if we're going after a certain item, or maybe there's a drop that's really hard to get. A good example in World of Warcraft, before I quit, after I went through all the first raid tier in the WoW Classic last fall, one of the items I never got was this really rare drop called Hand of Justice. Um, Hand of Justice is not it's not amazing because it's necessarily so great, but because there's nothing else in the item slot that it's for that is really decent. So it has little competition, and it's really good for a long time in terms of the item progression. But in order to get it, you have to do this dinky little boss in this maze of a dungeon called Black Rock Depths, and the chance for it to drop is like 2%. So what ends up happening is you have groups of players, so any melee class wants this item, that are all grouping together to try to grind out this item. And because you don't want to have it drop and then go to someone else, you end up playing with your friends. And that ends up being a community experience. Me and three other guys grinding out this weapon. And it can sound kind of horrendous, but that creates a story within that community, and it gives us something that we went through together that brings us closer together as humans. um, and whether we get the item or not, that's the kind of experience I enjoy from an MMO, and I could never find that from Destiny.
Funny you mentioned that because the way I found the clan that I'm with now actually came from a very similar experience. Um,
Do
it
tell.
was when, yeah, it was when the it's not Black Hammer. I keep on wanting to call it its D1, its D1 counterpart, the exotic sniper that came out back. Man, was this 2 years ago? But this exotic weapon, as soon as I look up the name and I can remember it, my God, I can't believe I'm forgetting it. This exotic weapon appeared out of nowhere one random Friday. It was a weekend event. They had nothing on the schedule that said anything about it coming out. Whisper of the Worm. My goodness, if they would quit renaming stuff, I could remember what it's called. In D2, it's called Whisper of the Worm. It's a heavy exotic sniper rifle. At the time, it's like special perks where that if you get 3 headshots in a row, you get 3 bullets put right back into the mag without taking from your reserves. So,
Which
um,
basically lets you shoot indefinitely if you have a,
pretty
a
much,
stable target like a raid boss.
yeah. This it came out with nothing, with no fanfare, no nothing. I didn't work on a Friday for some strange reason. I completely forget now. Um, I stumbled upon it organically, actually. That every week there's a do these activities on a planet, and I went to the planet, started doing these activities. I found this weird orb looking thing randomly, walked up to it, and it said, like, go inside or enter or one of those prompts. Go into it, and I'm just warped into this big cave that I'm supposed to figure out how to go through. It was a huge ass jumping puzzle. Then once you go through this huge ass jumping puzzle, you fight a bunch of hard enemies, and then at the end of it all, you have to fight 3 bosses, and you have 20 minutes to do all this. And there was no maps, no strategy guides. Streamers were figuring this out and, like, trying to figure out the path so that you could optimize it and get through it in the quickest route possible. I jumped into this cave, had no idea what I was doing, and had a blast actually because it was all new. The settings of the sound, the shading, just everything, the environmentals on it were just amazing. And out of nowhere, you could still actually hit this up if you guys want to try and do it this next week.
Yeah. Hell yeah, I'd love
I
to.
failed at the attempt. Yeah, I failed at the attempt. Jumped on the internet and went, "What the fuck did I just do?" And figured out that it was this whole thing. I was playing alone. There's no way I could do it. So later down the road during the day, I decided to do a raid, LFG, a raid group. Just happened to have a couple of the guys from the clan. Told them about what happened with me with this
So when you
whispered
say
worm gun.
LFG or raid group, what does that mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. Looking for group. So there's tons of websites out there for Destiny since it doesn't seem to have it on its own, where you could look for group and then find a group and then go do a raid in Destiny together.
And now this is an
So
experience that you can't matchmake into.
yeah, there's no
Okay.
matchmaking. If you try and go into it alone, you'll just drop in there by yourself and you'll have to
Right.
figure it out or do it or leave.
So this is one of the
I
things about
LFG
Destiny
them.
that I found
Yeah.
confusing when I was getting started is what stuff is match made. Like there's a lot of PvP, it's all match made. There's strikes, there's match made, there's gambit, it's match made. Stuff where you queue up and it finds a team for you. And there's stuff like this that's not. Why do you think Bungie decides to add matchmaking to, say, Crucible or to Strikes, but not to something like this?
Because people are why is there no matchmaking for these things? Because people
Yeah.
are dumb. Uh, plain and simple. The mechanics for the raids and this higher level stuff is stuff you have to think about, stuff you have to actually, put your brain into and actually be a functioning human to do. And people say all the time that they want matchmaking raids with this higher end content, but at the same time, now that we're in this new kind of transition to what's happening right now in Destiny, this new like 6-person activity, like Horde Mode game type that they have every season,
Right.
that has
And that kind of
similar.
started with
It has
Season of
like,
Opulence, right?
yeah, it started with Season of Opulence. It has mini raid like mechanics, and there are still people who don't. I mean, either A, they just don't do it and let other people do the work for them, or B, they just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And
So
so
I actually got to
that's why.
experience the Season of Opulence 6-man thing. It's called the Menagerie, right?
Yes.
So the Menagerie was something you could queue into, like we're talking about. It had raid light mechanics, which means stuff that was like being in a raid but less punishing.
Yes.
I think the Menagerie specifically was set up so that you were incentivized to do the mechanics well and defeat enemies rapidly. But if you didn't, you could still complete it and get a reward. It just would either be slower or the reward would be less less rewarding.
It's more of a time commitment thing. This is the setup that they've continued on with. So every
Right.
new 6-person activity they add each season, it's the same thing. If you can kill all your enemies, do all your objectives, you get done with it faster than if I screwed up, but it doesn't, send you back out of the game and you have to go back in.
Yeah, and how odd that their seasonal content they would choose to embrace a match-made experience rather than it sounds to me like it's kind of a half and half. Like we want matchmaking, which makes it so everyone can get into it, and we want to make it so anyone can complete it. But we also want it to be a little more hard, a little bit raid-y like, so there's an incentive. Do you think that
Mhm.
that's a good model for content, or do you think it just kind of is a master of none in terms of what it pulls off?
I think at its best, it was the latter. It's like a great way of doing it, and then at its worst, it's master of none.
Yeah, because
I
it seems to me that it
Destiny.
wouldn't. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that was fine. I was gonna say Destiny has needed a play mode like that. It's kind of neat. It's needed a always around that you could play Horde mode, or at least I've felt this way. And now that we get them seasonal, it is nice. That it's like, okay,
And what's
hey,
a
every
horde mode
season,
mean?
Horde mode is basically you're in an arena and enemies just come at you. So enemies are just going to come at you wave after wave, and after so many waves, you complete an objective and go on to the next thing. Um, and then sprinkled in there are some raid-like mechanics.
Yeah.
Um,
Black Armory was a little bit like
Destiny
that
has
too,
made it.
right?
Yeah, it was a little smaller scale, and that was fun at the time. But the 6-person mode is a little bit more because people want that opportunity to like show off the crazy builds that they have with their armor, and see how long they can chain their super, or like throw in their new crazy exotic weapons and just blast a bunch of enemies at the same time. This mode gives you that, and I think Destiny has always needed it. But I think that it still does need some tweaking. It is nice to have the we're not going to fail this. Like if I jump into this activity, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes and then at minute 19 we fail and I get no loot.
Yeah.
It's nice that there's some protections for you on that, but at the same time, it could be a little bit harder. Like I know there's a hard mode for each one of these horde mode activities that is non-match made. And I honestly, we like my clan, even though we're a clan that likes to play all the content, most of the guys in my clan haven't done that. Like I haven't done one of those,
Huh.
unmatch made hard modes with anybody in my clan yet.
Why? Why do you think?
The majority of my clan is not interested in that particular mode. My clan has a lot of tryhards, so we're like doing like we are day one in the raid trying to figure it out without any kind of help, or as soon as the raid launches, we want to jump in and go and try and figure it out on our own and get as far as we can. I
How
have a
big
very
is your
try-hard
clan?
clan.
How
We have like a solid 8 to 10 that are regularly online all the time, and then there's probably like another 10 that float around, will come in every so often. The problem with my clan is that it originated as a PlayStation clan, and then it evolved into a PlayStation and PC clan. So the PlayStation side has a lot more members than the PC side.
Okay, I was just wondering if it was a clan in the sense of like 300 people join, but no,
Oh,
that sounds like what we had.
Bungie clans are limited to 100 people.
We'll see. That's okay. Look, that's funny that there's a limit through the game. But so you said earlier that you found them because you needed help to get through a certain area. Do you remember like what the social experience was when they started helping you the first time? Like, what did you guys talk about throughout that?
We were just talking about our days, really. Like I said that I needed help getting the weapon, and one of the I just happened to find one of the main guys for this clan, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we just ran all of our clanmates through it. They had just done it multiple times, so they're totally down to just be like, "Oh hey, let's get you this gun so you can have it, so you can do all this crazy content because it is a loot game, so they want to make they were helping me get my loot, and that's
Sounds
I
very
just stuck
dungeony.
with them ever since. So
So
It,
you had a good social experience was your first interaction with them,
yeah,
basically. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny how all these games it really just cranks them up to another level for the experience when you're going through it with good conversation.
that's why I don't play with you.
I know. I talking to me is the worst.
oh boy.
Yeah, but
There's just
yeah, it's
All my love from Borderlands 2 came from just playing with my friends and talking about whatever throughout the day. It's just like when back in high school on the weekends you go to a friend's house or something, and when you have conversations, none of you are really interfacing with each other. You're all staring at the TV and talking to each other. And
mhm,
that's kind of the same experience you have now because we're all just staring at our own monitors, but we wouldn't look at each other anyways,
yeah,
and we're
and
just talking.
and I would dare to argue that would Halo have had the impact that it had, sticking with a Bungie game, would Halo have had the same impact if it didn't have the split screen multiplayer, people bringing 20 Xboxes to somebody's house and hooking them all up and playing? Like, would it have been as influential if it didn't have if it didn't have that? So,
Oh, I'm sure not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, when it comes to Halo, was the first Halo and did it have a online multiplayer, or was it Halo 2 that started that?
Halo 2.
Right. I was looking at
I
a
was there,
list.
man.
I was looking at a list of the most expensive to make games of all time because Destiny's on the list. It's like number
Mhm.
6. Um, And I was surprised when I was looking at the list because I saw that another Bungie game, Halo 2, was number 5. And then in
Doesn't surprise
2020
me.
dollars, it actually cost, according to this, and this is all just estimates, that Destiny cost $151 million to make, just up front, and Halo 2 was 217.
Well, do you know the backstory on that?
Do I? I don't know.
Yeah.
Fill me in.
Oh, so there. I'm trying to remember the timeline. I think it was like you had E3 in July or June, and then Halo 2 was supposed to ship that fall. And they took a demo to E3, and then when they got back to their headquarters, they're like, "We need to scrap everything and start over." And they scrapped everything and started over. Like the
Badass.
demo they showed at E3 was actually barely playable, and they only showed it as they showed it in a movie theater. Like nobody got to play it. Only Bungie employees played it because they were like, "Oh yeah, if we run off in this direction, it crashes it." So it was fully curated, fully played by a Bungie employee who knew not to mess with certain things, or else it would break it. And then once they got back to their studio, they were like, "We need to design this all over again."
That's funny.
Are you sure that Halo 2, I mean, Halo 1 did not have online play? Because I bought it for
Halo,
PC and I played it online.
yes, Halo on PC did have online play, and then you could play Halo 1 online if you hacked your Xbox back in the day. But Halo 1 on Xbox had no online play. Halo 2, like Xbox Live didn't exist when Halo 1 came out. Xbox Live launched maybe a couple of months before Halo 2, specifically for Halo 2.
That's crazy to me that that game had that much. I guess GoldenEye did the same thing, but that much success with multiplayer without online multiplayer.
Yeah. I mean, it was a different time.
Yeah.
Also, we're talking console. Like the whole console audience needed something different at that time than say PC, where being online was a little more of a it was a little further along, right? At the same
Mhm.
time that people were sinking their teeth into, for example, Halo 2, PC folks, and I count myself among them, we're sinking our teeth into Half-Life 2.
Yeah,
That was
it
our
was about
big
the same
game at
time.
that
Yeah.
time. Yeah, and so yeah, it's interesting hearing some of these reminiscences you have about Halo and Destiny 1. I know you played Destiny 1, right? Well,
Yes.
yeah, because that to me was like a parallel universe to what I got to experience. I like to tell people that the last console that I owned was the N64, just to put
Ha.
a date on it.
Yeah.
Halo 2 and Half-Life 2 were released at the same time.
2004. I think
Those
it's when Half-Life 2 came out.
Half-Life 2 seems wildly advanced compared to Halo 2.
I mean, Half-Life was a PC game compared to a console game, so yeah, it
See,
there was
that
there's it was
statement
a little different.
that statement right there is why I never had an Xbox and I never got into Halo, and I always kind of not necessarily scoffed, but I was confused by its success because there were games like Half-Life that I felt like blew it out of the damn water. But I guess the popularity of Xbox with college frat
Well,
bros.
well, like if you want to get in a little deeper into the subject here, um, it's simplicity because the thing about a gaming console is that it's you take it out of the box, you plug it in. If you connect it to Wi-Fi or internet and it has an update, it updates, but it does that on its own. Like the box takes care of itself, and it's that simplicity is why it's so easy. We like I understand we're different as more techie people, but would you give an 8-year-old parts to a PC computer and said, "Have fun, make yourself a gaming computer, and then get that thing up and running and playing Half-Life 2."
Right. I guess Steam has
So,
made that a lot more manageable over the years, but
yes, Steam has made that more manageable, but also at the same time, early 2000s, PC gaming was still kind of like, "Oh, hey, you're a nerd with glasses on in your mother's basement playing on your PC." Like that, it was a legitimate stigma people had about what PC gaming was. So that's
A
and I
legitimate stigma.
feel
That's quite a pairing of words. Hey, Will, riffing off of this, how much would you say that the success and the audience of Halo is represented currently by Destiny? Like, I guess that's not a good way to put the question. I come to Destiny as a PC gamer who likes shooters and likes MMOs, and it's like, oh hey, these does both these things. I should try it. I actually jumped in um, after Forsaken, which was a universally appraised expansion,
Yeah.
And after the announcement that Bungie and Activision were going to split, so it's going to be a good time to try the game.
Yes.
But you came into it early on. You were in Destiny 1, which is a console-only game.
Mhm.
How much of the current Destiny community that is active right now come from that console Halo heritage, do you think?
Ugh, I think that's just a good question. I don't know. I will 100% say that Destiny 1 got the sales numbers it did because of Halo and
Right.
its legacy.
Yeah.
But as
Halo
it
creators make an
pertains
MMO shooter. That's a great headline.
Yeah, as it pertains to the people who are playing now, I think that uh well, the Master Chief collection just came out on Steam. So
Right.
I don't know
Well,
if that like I'd have to look back at the numbers and see if after that released, if Destiny took a little bit of a dip in its numbers because now those Halo people were going off to play
Oh,
Halo.
yeah.
That
I
might be
wouldn't be
something to
surprised.
look at. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
there's no doubt that Halo, Destiny 1 success came from just the name Bungie being associated with Halo,
Yes.
because when you when you total in advertising and everything, the budget for Destiny 1 was $500 million before it even launched,
Yes.
and you got to be super confident to spend that much on a game to know that you're going to make it back really quickly, and they were just because of Halo.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
I can agree with that.
they didn't actually spend that much to make it, but that's how much the agreement with Activision was for. So I think that way that shook out financially. That's what my research told me anyway.
what I saw was just it's the but total budget for everything, not just game development, but also for advertising it, which they
Yep.
did advertise the shit out of that game. It was everywhere.
I think there's another crazy stat out there that the advertising for Destiny 1 like overshadowed the actual money spent on developing it.
Yeah,
So
this
that
great
you might be able
wiki
to find that number
article
somewhere.
that's out there. It's called "List of Most Expensive Video Games to Develop." It has a column for development costs and a column for marketing costs. And for Destiny, it says the development costs were under 140 mil, and the marketing costs were under 140 mil, which means that the total cost could be anywhere up to 280, but it estimates 151. I don't know where those
Hmm.
numbers come from, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting too. Like the very top game on this list of the most expensive is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. 50 million to develop and 200 million dollars in marketing.
God.
Well, I
Holy
Which is
mean,
shit.
weird because why do you even need to market that game? Call
back
of
then
Duty
you
is just
did.
like a guaranteed. Well, even at that point, that's like game number
W-
7, isn't it?
Uh oh yeah, no. Okay, so I'm trying to remember the Call of Duty timeline. Modern Warfare 2. See, Modern Warfare, the first Modern Warfare was the
That
gamble.
was Modern Warfare was 4, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Call of Duty 4, but also that was the gamble. That was the like people the Call of Duty 3 had lower sales than 2, I think. Like their sales weren't as good, and then they released 4, which was the Modern Warfare, which blew up Call of Duty. So yeah, I guess that makes sense that Modern Warfare 2, they spent more money on it. They hyped it up to like for all get out. And yeah, okay, I just needed to get the timeline straight in my head. Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. Yeah.
Oh, it's a juggernaut now, so it must have worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always scoff when I see the advertising cost of like any big film or a big game or something, but they always make it back pretty much, so they know what they're doing.
Takes a lot of money to put a video game on a soda can. So, yeah.
Destiny 1 didn't even get off console, did it?
Yeah,
No.
Destiny 1 was console only. That was a big push about D2 was that hey, we're making the jump to PC. This is also going to be PC friendly kind of thing.
Did Destiny 2 has it done better than Destiny 1?
I do not know. I wish
Financially?
I had looked that up before
Yeah, I don't know
before
either.
this.
I mean, I would think just with the numbers of PC being added in, it would
Yeah.
have to be.
I I want to say that Destiny 2 did not do as well as D1 because of how D1 was kind of handled at first. There was a lot of drop off in D1 just because of how things panned out and how people didn't like the game and things weren't let's see like now anybody who's in Destiny is used to the way it works. Like you grind up to this point and after you finish all the story missions and you grind it up to this point you're ready for the raid. In D1 nobody knew that. um I Greg, I told you about how I played all of D1's story and then put the game down for 2 and 3 weeks because I didn't have a clan, I didn't have people that I knew that played the game. I didn't know that there was a amount of time that I didn't know the raid was out there. There's a lot that wasn't shown and wasn't, like, fully explained when playing the game, but once I got involved in the community, that it became much clearer and I got hooked and started playing, weekly, daily, and things like that.
And that
I
seems to be the
remember,
hook that Bungie relies on, is to get their community passionate and have their community tell new players how to play the game and how to enjoy
Which
it.
is actually kind of crappy. That's bad game
Well, in my
development.
case, it was because I spent like 200 hours playing this game last year, and I felt like I didn't have any fun. I even joined your guys' clan and tried to play with you guys, and I just got to a point where I was like, what the hell am I doing here? Well, I'm going to do
Yeah.
bounties with a clan that's not around except for the one time a week they raid, and they just plow
Yeah.
through it without telling me what the fuck I'm doing. Like, why am I bothering?
see, that's the fun of clans from where Greg and I come from is that you play different clans. So it's a collection of people that you're friends with mostly, but
Mhm.
you also compete with other people who you basically hate, from what I remember. But in Destiny, that does that exist in any form with clans?
An organized
Not
competitive
really.
format. Didn't there used to be
No, not
something like
really.
that, Will?
They trying to remember. They tried to do that. I believe that the guide there was a in the beginnings of D2 there was guided games. I'm sure somebody could correct me on this, but I believe that there was some, well, if I want to use the word synergy with guided games, which is basically a version of matchmaking for raids where you help people who haven't raided before. And the clan had something. Your clan had something to do with that. I never did it, and it was actually buggy as hell, and like people would spend hours waiting for a group to get together.
Yeah,
I
and that's
think
that
that's
thing
the
where you
most
have a
they've done with
mentor,
them.
right?
Yeah, it's like a mentor thing. It's like
Right.
like if I was to go into guided games, I would say I'm an experienced raider. I know how to do this thing. I want to help someone else, and it would section me as someone wanting like a helper as a Sherpa, and then bringing other people that so I could get them through the raid and show them how to do it.
Trials of Osiris. What was Trials of Osiris?
Trials of Osiris was a weekend only PvP event where there was custom gear, custom armor, custom weapons that you could only obtain by doing trials. I am not a very good PvP player, so I never actually did trials myself, but I understand it enough. Um, there, you would have to. Oh, someone's going to correct me on this. It was either 7 or 9. I believe it was 9. You had to get through 9 matches of trials in a weekend to be able to go to what was called the lighthouse, which was just a general like it was like a patrol area, but that's where you would get your gear. You would jump into the game, say, "Hey, I want to do trials right now. It's the weekend." You win your 9 games, and then you get to go to the lighthouse and you get your gear. If you didn't win 9 games, you had to wait till next weekend, and it
Hmm.
was the top tier of the top tier PvP. It was the thing that kept Destiny 1 alive, really. I think D2 probably would have sold absolutely nothing if it weren't for Trials, because everyone, when there was no content to play, everyone was watching Trials. There are some streamers out there who have even, like, they made their name by playing Trials and streaming it.
So
So
why is it not a thing anymore?
because they released a very bastardized and terrible version of it in D2 in the very beginning, and it was not fun, and no one liked it. And uh, if you
Oh
wanted to get
God.
mean about it, they
Yeah, I
they
do.
changed the game mode. It was in original Trials in D1. It was an elimination. It was rounds of elimination, 3v3, and if you died, you could be revived, but you don't respawn. And if the other team takes all three of you out, you win your round. Very
Oh, that's
simple, right?
cool. Yeah, King of the
Yeah,
Hill.
it was a very simple game mode. They changed it. They added multiple modes. I played a little bit of it at the very beginning of D2, and they added multiple modes for it. They didn't have that elimination mode. Like the classic trials from D1 was nowhere in the game to be found. And it wasn't working. And because it wasn't working, they just took it out. They said, you know what? This is not what we were hoping for. Like, I think even at one point, on Twitch, there were more people streaming Destiny 1 trials than they were streaming Destiny 2 trials.
Ouch. Yeah, let's talk a
See,
Yeah.
little
I
bit
re-
about the transition from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2. Um, I
It was rough.
understand that it was yeah, exactly that. It was really rough. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it's cool that it came to PC, but I, my understanding is that the initial critical reception of Destiny 2 was pretty positive from reviewers who play a game for 5 to 10
Mhm.
hours and then put out a review. But
Yeah.
then the community got to the end game and put their hands up and said, what was the point of this?"
Yeah, that's exactly it. That was the greatest way to sum it up. Yeah, the initial gameplay, great. It was, the Red War, as they call it, the campaign, the Red War, which was two story
That's what you
campaign.
hated, Taylor, by the way.
It
Yes.
it was an actual story because people are always like, D1 didn't really have a story, whereas D2 it was like, oh hey, these guys came in solar system, took our light, but we found our light back, yada yada yada. There was an actual story that followed an actual like story progression, first, middle, end acts and things like that,
If
and
you
that was
refer to
praised.
that as an actual story, what the hell was the story of T1?
Was it like Dark Souls style where you have to like look for it in
It
D1?
well, in D1 it was in D1 it was a little less linear. Um, so when you started the game in D1, you maybe had 2 or 3 missions you had to go through before things kind of really opened up. And once you did those first couple of missions, it would then be like, "Hey, there are 3 missions or 4 missions just scattered on one of the planets that you can do in any order you want to do and do it however you want to do it." Things like that. Whereas D2 was just like, you're at this mission, now you go to this mission, then you go to this mission, then you go to this mission. And that was what was being praised. So, um, but the problem with D2 was the actual end game. That, and I hate to say it, but at times I think Destiny shines its best or its brightest when it caters more towards the hardcore crowd. Um, because Destiny is supposed to be a game that you play and you grind and you get things and you do more things. And if you tone things down, like what they did at the very beginning of Destiny 2, and cater more towards the casual, I think that's Destiny at its worst. So yeah.
See, the grinding part, um, that's where I get stuck. Is because
Uh-huh.
it's uh, it seems like you're doing all this grinding to get this thing, and then you get this thing. But what does this thing allow you to do?
Hmm.
It allows you to kill more things that give you more things.
Yeah.
And so that loop to me, I mean that loop kind of exists in Sekiro as well, but
Hmm.
in Sekiro I seek out these fights because when I win them, I feel like I accomplished something really great because you have to
Hmm.
have really good timing, you have to figure out the attack patterns of this enemy. You die many times before you win most fights.
Yeah.
But in Destiny, going through the campaign, at least in my experience with this game, was not deep. And it's because I didn't feel any of these things. But going through the campaign, it just felt like a knife through butter. And so the more equipment I got, the easier it got.
Yeah.
And the loop
Yeah.
didn't make sense to me.
I have a problem with Destiny loot too. Um, I
Destiny
have
2 has loot issues, plain and simple.
Yeah. So
Which
let
is
me
weird
tell
though, because
you
that's the
what
core
bugs
of
me
the
about
game.
it. Yeah. Well, this is the way that I like to think about any RPG game is, and you guys can tell me if you think this is reasonable or not, is that it's okay to have loot as a MacGuffin, something that drives the action, motivates you to get out into the world and engage with the game mechanics and do it with other people. But what makes the game good or not are the experiences you have along the way to getting that loot. Um,
Hmm.
and my experience as a Destiny player last year, late Forsaken, right around the Season of Opulence coming out, is that the experiences I was having was I was playing single player next to strangers 99% of the time.
Hmm.
And that
Yeah.
there were rare community events that came out where there was this bust of this big explosion of activity for a week or maybe two, where the community kind of woke up from its slumber and was like, "Oh, it's time to do stuff." People started communicating with each other and talking to each other, and there was good gaming going on and real community. And then everyone would get that loot because the way that I think Bungie structures those experiences is, although the hurdle towards getting to whatever the goal of that content is, like what you described with the random room thing with the symbols, and you
Whisper of the Worm. Oh,
yeah,
you mean the Corridors of Time?
Corridors of Time or Whisper of the Worm. Same kind of
Yeah.
idea is once you successfully do it, you get the thing, and then you're done. The
Yeah.
only way you
Did you
repeat
ever
it
go back and
is
do Corridors of Time again?
walk your friends through it, right?
Well, that one could actually be done completely. It was not a the hard part was figuring out the codes for the path that you needed to take. After that, the actual mission was very easy.
Right.
And I will jump in to say that all of these community events that they give you, they're for exotics. So there's the multiple tiers of weapons. When you get to the end game, you're dealing with your legendary weapons, which is your general, like, oh hey, a weapon randomly dropped from a strike or some activity, I pick it up and I go. Exotics are your special tier, have some special ability to them. You can only equip one exotic weapon at a time. You can only equip one exotic armor piece at a time. These are special weapons. These weapons have fixed roles, and I think
What is a
that is
role
kind of
for us non-Destiny
oh
players?
yes, sorry, I keep on jumping too far ahead.
No worries.
All weapons, all weapons have perks to them. These perks define how the weapon plays. On
Such
legendary
as
weapons, faster reload, more damage on headshots if you do a specific thing. There is one that's like if you shoot, what is it? There's a similar perk like what I described to that sniper rifle, where it's like if I get 3 headshots in a row with this pistol, it will put 1 bullet back in the mag that I'll have to fire.
and
Little
that's an
things like that.
exotic level perk, right?
No, that's not an exotic level perk. That's a legendary level perk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But Whisper of the
So
Worm
Is
is an exotic
better
weapon.
than legendary, or what
yeah,
is it?
exotic is generally better than legendary, and I probably am butchering these definitions, and someone's probably going to yell about it.
My
But
experience of it, Will, was that exotics have unique perks that do
they
things
do. They
that
do have unique perks.
generally
Like
perks don't do.
yeah, so like when I was talking about that sniper rifle, it was you have the potential for unlimited ammo if you do your shots correctly. Like that was the exotic thing about it is that if I get 3 headshots in a row, I do not have to reload. The bullets just magically reappear in the mag, and then it doesn't pull from like my reserves or anything. It's just free ammo. Like that's what's
And
exotic about it.
right. And are there legendary
So
perks that also have ammo mechanics, but maybe they're just less strong?
yes, there are.
Okay.
So what I was getting to is that these crazy, mini dungeon like levels or these mini levels that have a lot of community activity, they drop exotic weapons. Exotic weapons don't randomly roll perks. They have one set of perks and that's it. I think to get to the level of what you're talking about, they would need to create some type of awesome legendary weapon that's at the end that is also randomly rolled perks, and then that's when you'd get that game loop that you were talking about specifically, Greg. Um,
Which
and
is
at the
what
same
again?
time, which well, you were talking about how it's kind of like, oh, everyone got their gun and then they stopped. Like
Right.
this thing doesn't exist to me anymore because I already have the weapon.
It becomes dead
And
content for your
it becomes dead
community
content.
after a couple
Yes,
weeks.
yes. So I
Which
think
is
that
maybe okay. Like in traditional RPGs and MMORPGs, you gear
mm,
past a dungeon, you gear past a raid, and it's okay not to have to replay that same thing over and over again, as long as there's something to motivate you to play the game that creates an enjoyable game. Um,
yeah.
I and now correct me if I'm wrong, Will, but didn't random rolls? So the idea of random rolls, tell me if I get this right, is that weapons and armor, although I know armor is different now, but weapons specifically, when you get pistol of the forgotten or whatever, I'm making up a gun, I don't know if
Hmm.
that's real. Pistol of the forgotten, say it drops from a certain strike, which is like a dungeon you can matchmake
I love
into.
that you made that up, and it sounds like it fits right into the game.
Yeah, yeah. So Pistol of the Forgotten, and it has, say, 3 random perks that draw from a pool of perks. And you know how you like to play the game. You're a PvPer. You want it to do you want it to have a good range stat, which means that it gets good damage from range. You want it to have a certain reload perk. You want a certain set of perks, so you're going to grind out that strike. Just as an example, to get this certain pistol, and that's maybe something you do with friends. Oh, I want to get this specific role.
Hmm.
Um, and I know that one of the things that people loved about, okay, so before I jump into that, it's important to mention that at Destiny 2 release, random rolls didn't exist. They were taken away from the Destiny formula when Bungie said, "Hey, Destiny 1 is done now. You have to play Destiny 2, but we're going to take away your random rolls." And then it came back in Forsaken. Am I getting that
Mhm.
timeline right? Do
That is
you?
the correct timeline. And
I'm a little
actually, it was
confused. Go ahead.
well, it kind of goes back to something that I've alluded to a few times is that Destiny, I think, shines its brightest when it kind of leans towards the more hardcore. Destiny 2, they came out and they said, hey, you know what? We want to make this a little bit easier for people. We know because one of, I remember this, one of the stats they threw out before D2 came out was that, man, was it like 2 or 3%? Only 2 or 3% of the Destiny 1 community through its lifespan started a raid and then finished a raid.
Uh-huh.
Like that low, single digits of the player base. And you think about the millions of people who
Right.
played the game. So they wanted to change that, and they simplified and dumbed things down enough to say, "Hey, there's not going to be random rolls. So if you get a gun, you have the gun. You don't have to worry about getting the best roll for it or anything like that." They did the same for armor, and that's I think that destroyed the end game. That's like I was saying, like
Because there's
where
no
how you
incentive to
said,
go back. You get the
yeah,
thing
like
and then
how
you're
you
done. There's
said
no
that
reason to play anymore.
the reviewers who came in and played 5 and 6 hours and then stopped, they said, "Hey, this is a good game." Whereas the Destiny community, who obsess over the game and play it for hours on end, they got a couple hours in and said, "Why do I even play?"
Yeah. The
So I
thing
remember the
that
first time I started playing it, you were playing it with me, and you pointed to your power number. Is that what it is? Whatever it
It's
was,
power level.
Yeah, it's called power level now,
power
which
level. You pointed to it and said, "And the goal is to get this to 550 or whatever it was." And my
mhm,
first thought was just, why? And
Oh
then even
man.
as I played the game, I'm still like, why? Because the power level doesn't translate to PvP at all, right?
yeah, in the
And
normal PvP modes, it does not.
the enemies scale as you progress, so your power level doesn't really mean shit because as you get more powerful, they get more difficult, which is how
Yeah,
a game's supposed to be. But that's if that's the ultimate goal to chase after, I don't care.
Yeah, and this
currently in
is gonna
D2,
be
the way it stands is that your power level is like your gatekeeping of the next content. Because, I was saying you need to get to 550 because at 550 you could start to do the raid.
Oh,
That's
okay. So
that
it's a
was the
gateway
point
to
of
more
that. It's a gateway to more content, which I would say is a little bit of lazy development because it really currently it serves no real bigger purpose than just, oh hey, I can't do this content because I'm not high enough power level.
and it sucks. It
Borderlands
feels
2.
bad. Like to be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, my number's not high enough." Like I'm not high enough. It's like I'm not tall enough to get into this ride kind of
Yeah.
thing. But when
And
you're
then at
talking
the
about
same
height,
time,
you feel your height. You know when you're getting
mhm,
taller. But
yeah.
actually getting a drop that increases your light level in Destiny doesn't make you feel any more powerful. It doesn't make you
Yep.
stomp lower level enemies any harder. It just lets you
Yep.
play more stuff at the same power you're already at. This is one of the biggest problems I have with Destiny is that all of the stats and perks feel bad. None of them give that same visceral sense of I'm getting more powerful that you get when you get a new weapon in World of Warcraft.
Mhm.
So was that does that number exist to get me to play the campaign, basically?
I think when you
The
played Taylor, you couldn't even
number
play the rest of the game till you finished the campaign.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's
if you
still that
started
way.
out brand new and during Forsaken, you kind of had to do the normal campaign that released, then you could do Forsaken, yeah.
So, I mean, so what's the average power level increase by the time you just finish the vanilla campaign?
Oh,
It goes up with
vanilla
each release.
campaign. Well, by the time you get out of the vanilla campaign, you should have been somewhere in like the 250s, the 280s, I think, because
Wh-
you needed to run the raid to be able to get to level 300.
And by the
So,
time you were playing Taylor, I
bleh.
think we were in like the 700s or something like that. Because whenever they
Yeah.
do a new content drop, whether it's a season or an expansion or whatever, they increase the max light the power level.
Because it sounds like the reason to get you can't play more until you play more, which yeah, that's poor. The Borderlands 2 did something similar, and that's where throughout the campaign you start with 2 weapon slots, and then at some point it upgrades to 3, and then finally it upgrades to 4. And the only way you can do that is to play through the campaign. But there was nothing that told me I can't go somewhere yet. It was just that I could only have 2 weapons, 3 weapons, or 4 weapons, which I would greatly prefer that to being told that you've got to go play more over here before you can play here.
Or to have it set up so that the mechanics that prevent you from being successful in higher level stuff are a little less abstracted. Like to say, oh, my armor level isn't high enough. Because my armor level isn't high enough, I take too much damage. Or to say, oh, because my weapon damage isn't high enough, I don't do enough damage to realistically take out this enemy. But instead of having things like that the player can look at and easily measure and understand, it has this abstract light level.
Yeah, the so to explain for you guys and everyone else, the your overall light level is the average of all your gear stats. And since you actually said that, Greg, I do like that. I do like what you just said a lot more. Like you take more damage with lower light level or lower power level armor. You do less damage with lower power level weapons. Right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is your average. So you just want to have the gear that gets you the highest power level, and then that's it. I can't tell you the number of times that we've like my clan has pulled someone through a raid that was like way too low light level to do it, but we could drag them through it because we could compensate for them.
Yeah.
And now that you've just mentioned that and I've heard it, I feel like that's what Destiny needs to be. Like if that person that we're pulling through the raid has really high level weapons but really low level armor, they can still damage with us, but they can't take as many hits, and then
And
vice
that makes
versa
it
if you were to
feel
swap
more
it.
meaningful when you get
Yeah,
a good armor drop. It's like, oh, I know
yeah,
what this does for me, and I can feel the effect immediately.
Yeah.
Instead of now, where it feels like you're taking all your gear and you're throwing it in a pot and turning it into a stew.
yep,
It takes the viscerality out of it, which makes it less rewarding to get stuff, which makes it less rewarding to pursue this stuff, which makes you not care about logging in to get it. It's a
yeah.
it's a big problem for an RPG to have loot that's not exciting. And I think what they do with exotics is pretty cool, um, but I don't think it's enough.
Well, even just the motivation as loot, which I don't ever really care about, it's still a beautiful game.
Yeah,
And that's usually a good motivation to get me to play something like Borderlands 2.
because you're
It's
an
a
artist, right?
cartoon. Yeah, I guess so.
What do
But
you do,
Borderlands
Taylor?
2 is
Tell everyone.
I'm a video editor for a living and I do photography as a hobby and I have a bachelor's of fine arts and visual effects. So I have many years of an art background. So I appreciate the hell out of how much work goes into a video game. Uh, but Destiny 2 is full of these really beautiful environments, but all I remember about any of them is just running through a vast emptiness to get to the next area. There was nothing about any of these environments that I remember experiencing or using. They were just a backdrop that I ran through that created a big gap of downtime from one area to the next.
I know what you're talking about, Taylor, and I know what you're feeling you're lacking there. I would describe that as the way that Bungie has decided to do its world building. In a more classical MMO, you might go through a zone, um, say, the the Upsea Canyons or whatever you want to call it. And you might go from village to town in this area. You might talk to the people there. You might help them solve their problems, defeat some bandits, whatever, general RPG stuff. But as you go through these areas and you do these tasks in this area, you learn about it. You become connected to it. You have an NPC that
Right.
tells a joke that maybe you laugh at and you remember that. You do it with your friends because there are challenges that are too hard for you to do by yourself. Um, and that creates a
So,
connection to it. But in Destiny, almost everything that you could learn about it is disambiguated to the user interface. You get a
yeah,
drop, and then you
so
have to go into your lore tab to read.
as you say that, I remember the story of any place that I was running past was usually the floating robot guy something saying something like, "Oh, looks like everyone died here." And that was the story of everywhere as everything was ravaged and destroyed. But even since we were comparing it to Half-Life earlier, and I think Borderlands 2 is also guilty of this as well. These big empty areas in a game like Half-Life, that's where a puzzle would be. So even though there's no enemies going on and there's something that I have to go through to get to more enemies, it's usually something that engages me in the form of making me use my brain to get past it. Whereas in Destiny, I don't think anything like that at all exists.
And
And
that's
for
the
the type of
danger.
game it is,
It turns your brain
what?
off. That kind of stuff turns your
Yeah.
brain off. It makes you
Yeah,
stop
well, the
engaging.
puzzles you're looking for would be in the raids there. That's where your main puzzles are gonna be,
Well, why
and
not
you never got that far.
if they make these giant maps that I'm just running through for absolutely no reason, why not either cut that out or put something in those spots?
Yeah, you need to get to the Forsaken content. That was one of the reasons why that was so highly praised, is that there was an in-game content patrol area called the Dreaming City, and it utilized that idea really well. There was, you would walk into this seemingly random looking cave and there'd be something to activate or something to grab to take somewhere else to activate. There's a lot of little puzzles in there that showed what Destiny could be, and it could be like what you just described, but they just haven't put that kind of effort and work into all of the patrol zones and all of the empty spaces.
But so if I were to get, is that the latest DLC that came out,
It
Forsaken?
was
It's
a
one from last
DLC
year.
ago, yeah, last year.
If I if I buy that, do I have immediate access to that, or do I have to do some
You
sort
have
of
to go through
work
the
to
story
get to it?
first to unlock it.
Ah, see, that's
Well, well, yes, you would have to play the Forsaken campaign to get to the Dreaming City. Like, it doesn't you don't just get Forsaken and the Dreaming City's unlocked. You have to actually go through the story mode, and then you have to do a quest to unlock this patrol area.
how
Yeah,
long is that?
That's hours of
it'll take
content.
you. It'll probably take you if you're just starting from Forsaken start. It'll probably take you, 8 to 10 hours realistically.
So would that be
Maybe
8 to 10
less.
hours of the exact same Destiny 2 I have been experiencing?
Forsaken campaign was a lot easier to enjoy than the Red War. I thought it
I
was a
mean, you
lot
had your
better.
Sparrow unlocked. That was easier. So,
Yeah, yeah, but it's really cool hearing both you guys' perspective on the Dreaming City. I actually did get to play through the Dreaming City, and that's where I spent a lot of my time. Um, I really liked Dreaming City at first, and I stumbled into some of those puzzles, Will, and I didn't actually like them. What I ended up finding out is that in order to get these puzzles done, it wasn't about figuring it out. It was about looking it up on YouTube. Because
uh,
these puzzles are not actually practical to solve in like a casual gaming session. Like they're not actual
Hmm.
open world content. It's still almost part of that vein of community problem solving where it's all farmed out to the content creators.
yeah.
And so if you like having YouTube up on your side screen, then and like listening to Dado explain stuff to you, then sure, that's really dope. But if you want to meet an NPC who's going to tell you a story about the world that you're going to be able to connect with or something, or like Dreaming City still felt like a stage to me and not like a
Hmm.
world.
Yeah.
Despite all the cool there, and there was cool stuff there. I liked the well event. Um, the first 15 times I did it.
Yeah.
But after you start to be able to read the matrix a little bit and understand how it's put together, um, as far as open worlds go, it's a pretty shallow one, even as the pinnacle example. I thought in terms of
Yeah.
like Will, have you played any other MMORPGs besides Destiny?
Actually, no.
Okay, so I've played Guild Wars 2. I've
Hmm.
played World of Warcraft. That's my experience there.
Yeah.
Um, And the most important thing about these games, arguably, the thing that really distinguishes them from other games with similar mechanics, is the social component and the world.
Yeah.
Because anyone can make a game with a story and mechanics in it, but to turn that into a social experience where you feel like you're in a place is a special thing.
Hmm.
And with Destiny, I was never tricked into feeling like I was in the world of Destiny. I always feel like I'm reading about Destiny, like someone's telling me about it. Um, and I think part of
I
that
think that's
is
a
issues with
that's a
story
crutch that
delivery
came
and
over from
characterization.
D1.
How so?
Um, so in D1, I know from listening to from your earlier podcasts, Taylor, you had a few things to say about your robotic companion, the Ghost. Um,
Yeah.
the Ghost is supposed to be this your introduction to the world, because the story of Destiny is that you're somebody who's been dead for hundreds of years, and the Ghost revives your body and says, "Hey, you've been chosen to do this thing." So in D1, the Ghost was supposed to be like, "Oh, hey, this is normal to me, but this little thing over here, this is this, and this," and the Ghost is supposed to explain it to you. I think that is a crutch that they brought over from D1, and I think it had to do with the PC launch, because the ghost still explains things as if you haven't lived in the world, if you haven't been in the world. And one little trick that they did is that if you were an Xbox or PlayStation player, and like, I played D1 on Xbox, and then as soon as D2 came out on Xbox, I could play it on Xbox again, or I could play it on Xbox, and the ghost would talk to me as someone who's already been in the world. The ghost would say like, "Oh, hey, remember when you did this? Well, this is kind of like this happening again." The ghost would reference that, and there's a little less feeling of what you were talking about. And now, what I'm saying about this, they're leaning on this as a crutch for PC. As a PC player, I don't get that option at all. There's not like a checkbox where I can be like, "Hey, put in the veteran dialogue and talk to me like I know what I'm doing." In PC, it's just you're a brand new guardian who just woke up and doesn't know anything about the universe, and so the ghost is just going to explain everything at you. And that is a crutch, that is a narrative crutch that they are still using, and they need to get away from a little bit, in my opinion.
Yes, they should have named him Exposition Bot.
Yeah. So, and Taylor, to tell you my story about the ghost and my disappointment with the ghost, is that it seemed to me that the ghost was kind of lifted up as like your cop buddy. Like, I was expecting D1 to be a little bit like a buddy cop movie where you and your ghost have a dialogue and a back and forth, and it was kind of presented in that way. I had to say, a little bit of false advertising. And then I played D1 and realized how much dialogue my actual character has. And then there was, after one expansion, after one of the expansions in D1, your playable character went completely silent for, what was that, 3 or 4 years before Forsaken came out, and they had another single line of dialogue.
One line.
Yeah.
Wait, are you
So
talking about Destiny 1 or Destiny 2?
well, I was talking about the Destiny 1 in transition into Destiny 2 in Forsaken. So there was a 3 or 4 year block that went from like the middle of Destiny 1's run until Forsaken, that came out in Destiny 2, that your character had no dialogue whatsoever.
Did you play as Cade 6 in Destiny 1, or was he still just a character?
He was a character, yeah.
Okay, so really, the people you played as in Destiny 1 are nowhere to be found in Destiny 2.
You're still that person. I
You're
think
still supposed to
canonically.
be that person.
Yeah.
Canonically.
Oh.
Like, even
Okay.
though I play on
Why
PC,
bother?
yeah, even though I play on PC, and like, I played D1 on the Xbox, I still consider my PC characters to be the characters I started in D1. So that's just how my brain thinks of it. But yeah,
And
no,
that's the way the story's written.
yeah, that's the way the story's written. But yeah, the Ghost, there's some really good potential there. If Destiny was to come, or Destiny, if Bungie was to come out and say, "Hey, you know what? We're going to make this more like a buddy cop movie where you and your ghost dialogue a little bit more," I would pay. So I would throw money at the screen. Uh,
I mean, there's no real role-playing elements to this game, so what's the point of making your character silent?
That's a great question.
it is a great question.
That's usually the reason you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's no way to build your character that distinguishes you from any other character.
I mean, you could make your haircut funky. I mean,
That
Oh
still
boy.
wouldn't affect
yeah,
dialogue,
yeah, it doesn't.
though.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, like there aren't like
Um,
crafting professions. Like there's no way to
Mhm.
specialize your character in a way that's not purely aesthetic.
Yeah.
That's why I was so
Uh,
confused to have this robot that's doing all the talking on my behalf. Why don't just, I mean, I'm not Gordon Freeman. Just give my character a reason to talk. Would make the
yeah.
game a lot more engaging than to have a robot just talking to me endlessly by himself. Because then those giant empty areas could have been the back and forth between the robot and your character.
Yeah.
And that's a
And I
game
mean,
I
you might
heard
just be a
that
better
God
writer.
of War. God of War supposedly did a really good job of that. You remember in our first episode, Taylor, we were talking with Matt about that, and he was describing how in God of War, they have essentially a character who's a defeated boss, who's just a disembodied head that magically talks to you about the world and the lore. And they have these travel sections where you're on a boat going from point A to point B, and this disembodied head will speak up and start telling you some story,
Yes.
and that's how it delivered a lot of the world building.
Right,
Yeah,
Last of Us.
you guys definitely need to check out God of War. It does that excellently.
As soon as it comes to PC,
Yeah. I never had any issues with how they presented that. I never. It was I never tried to avoid it, like try and fast travel to get away from hearing him talk. It just blended in really well. They did really excellent programming on how smart he was when he chose to talk, and it really added to the game. And that would be excellent to see in Destiny in some way, shape, or form. That I think I really wish you guys had played this game, but I really think that is kind of like a narrative standard right there. Like they did it so well.
Last of Us, the same thing. I mean, that game is about the relationship between Joel and Ellie, and so any area where nothing's going on, they build on that relationship. And even if you just pick a spot and stand there for a while, Ellie pulls out her joke book and just starts reciting a bunch of lame
Yeah,
jokes, and it builds their characters and their relationship.
which is a joke book she got in like I don't know chapter 2 or something. Like she found it along the way, so that was even more development
Right.
there. Like yeah, yeah.
I think one of
So
the main things that makes MMOs different in this respect is that those lulls in pacing aren't used to deliver world building. They're used to give you a chance to engage socially with people in the game, to chat, to talk
Good point.
about your day, to check the auction house or whatever. Um, and traditionally, MMOs. I'm just thinking. I'm brainstorming about this because there are two examples of MMOs that I'm very familiar with that I mentioned earlier: WoW and Guild Wars. WoW
Mhm.
managed to build its world in a way that was never in your face and that you could completely opt out of. But if you chose to opt in, you could read the quest text, you can talk to the NPCs, you could look at the environmental storytelling. It was there, but it was never
Mhm.
served up to you. Never there was never a force feeding of it like through audio lines. Um, Guild Wars is a little more modern in that it actually does have a tremendous amount of voice acting in it. And I don't it does a pretty good job of it, but Destiny somehow has it presents a world to you through these incredibly obtuse puzzles that you can't solve on your own. It gives you gear to grind for that doesn't feel meaningful. It gives you cooperative experiences that are, for the most part, when you're not having one of these community rushes, just playing side by side solo with strangers. And it gives you these worlds that are nothing, there's nothing below the skin. Like there's nothing there below how good it looks.
Mhm.
And what you're left with is exactly the feeling I described it previously: plastic. It feels plasticky to me. Like there's nothing solid about it. You can't build anything on top of it. It doesn't support a heavy community experience, but it has a tremendously engaged community. It really boggles my mind and is making me question whether I did it wrong. And actually, next week, a bunch of us are going to jump into Destiny, and I think we're going to play through Shadowkeep and try to give it another shot. We'll see how much actual interest there is in our little friend group, but what I'm actually hoping is that this is kind of the before podcast. And then in a little while, say in a month, we'll come back and do an after where we'll have updated impressions and be able to talk to you a little bit more intelligently. I just rambled. I
are we supposed
apologize
to be
for
playing
that.
Shadowkeep soon?
You,
Is that the plan?
yeah,
It was
you have it
in it
going
was
yet?
in the Discord, man. Come on.
You guys think I read shit?
I'm gonna play. Matt's gonna play. Matt's got some friends he brought in that are playing. So I mean, you don't have to join us, but
Oh, I
I
love
guess
hating
I could
things
jump in
though.
there too.
yes, you like
I
hating
mean, if
things.
Taylor
Remember
plays, I
that.
have to play too because I have to be able to call him on his bullshit.
And then we
My
could spend the whole
bullshit.
time making fun of your clanmates.
Oh yeah, totally, totally. Can we stream it so they can like watch us live? Just
Absolutely. I
instead.
stream almost every
Oh
time
yeah,
I play.
there we go.
Absolutely.
But I'll
Yeah,
try
I
not to
don't
jump on and just ruin your fun with all my advancement.
see. I'm gonna have an inner debate though. How much is Forsaken?
I don't know. I bought it for
I
20
I
bucks, but I think it might have been on
I
sale.
honestly don't know what the pricing structure is now.
Let's look it up. Buy
Because
Destiny for
I'm noticing nowadays that my hunch on not wanting games tends to always be correct. And the last one I tried that with was Monster Hunter World, and that was the first game I ever got a refund on. I guess I could just get a refund on Forsaken. Can you get refunds on DLC?
I don't know.
It's treated like a full-fledged kind of game, so you should be able to, yeah.
I'll
You just
play it for 1 hour and 50 minutes and then
it's
stop and ask for my money back.
It won't tell me how much it costs because I've already bought it. Oh wait, here it
that's an
is.
updated.
25 bucks. But if you buy the $50 edition, you get Shadowkeep and Forsaken, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be playing Shadowkeep.
Not. So wait, you can't just buy Shadowkeep on its own?
Yeah, you
You
can,
should be able
but
to.
I don't think people are going to be playing Forsaken. That's what I'm saying. I think you'll be playing it alone.
Oh, I was talking about whichever one you guys were
The
talking
group
about.
will be doing Shadowkeep, the newest
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Shadowkeep's a new one.
Have
It's
you played that, Will, or is that not out yet?
Oh, no,
35
yeah,
bucks.
I played it. It came out October. It came out in October, yeah.
I remember you told me when Destiny 2 first came out that basically they did it all wrong, but then you thought they kind of fixed it. Do you still have that stance?
Yeah. Something I talked with Greg about before this was that while Destiny's vanilla game launches have been muddled with problems and different things like that, and people dissing the story and saying, "Ah, there's not a story." Their DLCs, they're big DLCs. So like in D1, it was Taken King. In D2, Forsaken, Shadowkeep. They have really hit those out of the park. Like those have really been solid. And when it comes to Destiny content and play it like hours played and things like that, it's the in between that I feel a lot of the problems come in.
So what is it? What's different in those three compared to the base game?
Like when you're talking about the quality of them, I honestly have no idea why the
Well,
DLCs are better quality than the actual released games.
I'll
I
give you
mean,
my
if you
impression on it,
thought,
Taylor.
okay,
Like if you compare, say, the Red War, which is the Destiny 2 vanilla launch story, versus Forsaken, which is the expansion that came out last year that I primarily engaged with. What I noticed as the difference is that the um, the layers of rewarding activities you could do were deeper and more gratifying in the game. I also noticed that the quality of the storytelling was much higher. That the campaign play was a lot more enjoyable because it was much more of spokes coming out of a wheel rather than a linear thing that you had to plod your way through. And it also reintroduced the idea we talked about with random rolls, where if you found a gun you liked, you could actually go after that gun to some extent and try to get a really perfected version of it, which before Forsaken, there's only one version of each gun. So once you had it, there's no reason to keep going for it. If you like grinding, that's an upside. If you don't, maybe it's not. But that's one of the big differences that I saw. Did I miss anything big important there, Will?
No, actually, that was pretty good. Actually,
I mean, it
um,
sounds like Destiny is just not a game designed for me because it's if it's designed to be an endless grind to get people to play, the way if I was younger, I probably would be all for that. But the way I look at games now is they're an investment of my time, and I have to decide what I want to split my time doing a lot. And to dedicate a few hours of my day to this thing that gets me absolutely nowhere in life and doesn't even really entertain me along the way, that just feels like a big waste, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and if
mhm.
I was jumping into it solo, I would feel the same way. The main reason I'm interested in jumping back in is because some of the other guys are doing it too. And I think if you do it with us, you might have just enough fun to hate it for our benefit.
Entertaining hate.
Yeah,
Well, so I started playing Dishonored 2 again today just because I've been wanting to for so long. And, um, what I was saying about Destiny being a big world full of nothing, Dishonored is the exact opposite, where these are very, not small, we'll say cozy levels, but they are just absolutely brimming with details and story and items to find and beautiful art. The game is gorgeous.
does
And
that game have good personality to it? Like, does it do a good job of like feeling human?
I would say so.
yes, I would say definitely. There's so much uh, just lore in that universe, but I've never played that. It's a game you can't really play with someone. I started streaming it just because I stream every game that I play now,
Yeah.
but I have a lot of fun just walking around this world they've created by myself and learning about it. It's so well done that I don't feel like I even need a social experience to go with it at all.
Yeah, I
Well,
hear ya.
that's yeah, I mean, that's kind of the difference between a this like a straight up campaign, like contained story, and then whatever MMO stuff Destiny is trying to emulate.
What's the current raid in Shadowkeep, Will?
The current raid would be the Garden of Salvation. It
Is
came
it
out,
good?
it like released with Shadowkeep. I think it's good. I think it's on the good end of the raids. Everyone has their like list of, these raids are the best from A to B or 10 to 1 or whatever. I would say it's on the I don't really have one of those lists, but it's on the good end of the spectrum. I think it just kind of hits all the right notes, really kind of reminiscent bits from older raids in D1.
What else should
Not
we watch out
my
for
favorite.
in Shadowkeep as we're jumping back into it?
The main thing in Shadowkeep is the new armor system. They kind of freed up the armor system. So we spoke about how guns have perks to them, and when you get a gun drop, it will have these three perks set on it, like, and that's it. That's your roll of the gun. Um, Now, when you're grinding for gear post Shadowkeep, you're grinding for stat numbers. So they will have so now those stats are broken out into intellect, discipline, strength, what was it? Mobility, resilience, and recovery, which is a
Very
lot.
RPG like.
Yeah, they wanted to turn up the RPG with some of the stuff in Shadowkeep, so they did that. And each one of those stats has a number value, and you want the highest possible number value for that armor, and that's
So
it.
getting an armor piece is like getting a pool, and it's a pool that you can put stuff into essentially.
Yes. So now, yeah. So what I was trying to get to was that armor pieces don't come with pre-rolled stats anymore, or pre-rolled um, um,
Perks.
perks. Thank you. They don't come with pre-rolled perks anymore. They come, hey, you were rolled with this much ability, and then you can pick and choose the stats that you want to put into your armor pieces.
Right. Yeah, I'm really excited to see how much I enjoy that. I played a couple of hours of Shadowkeep over the last few days because kind of talking about this podcast got me in the mood. And
Hmm.
I had the chance to take my class item and kind of put some stuff, put some glimmer and shards into it, and slot in some mods, and it felt very satisfying. Like I felt actually like I was customizing my armor piece. Um, I think I'm gonna
Hmm.
need to get through the campaign into max power level before I have a good read on whether or not that system actually addresses the the frustration with armor itemization that existed before
Hmm.
Shadowkeep.
Now, I want to explain something. I don't know if I want to explain this to like either pre-disappoint you or just give you a heads up.
Yeah,
So
give me your
remember I
take.
said Destiny, one step forward, two steps back. So the opening up of the armor was that one step forward. The two steps back on armor is that all armor has an affinity now. And the affinity is based off of the three elements that are in the
Yeah,
game a lot. The
yeah.
arc, the solar, and the void. So if you get a chest piece that has like a void affinity, it's not going to be able to have certain perks be placed into it. Some perks are affinity based,
And
while
do
other perks are not.
armor pieces always the same affinity, or
No.
so you can get
So
armor of
this
the
is a
void,
frustration in the
armor
community.
of the sun, armor of the arc, and it's all the same piece with just different elements.
So yeah, the armor's not like renamed or anything. Get like this chess piece, but one of the random rolls for it will be the affinity. So when that chess piece drops and you get it in your inventory, it will roll. Hey, is this going to be arc, solar, void? It'll drop as a void, and then it will also drop the stat numbers.
And the
So
stat
there's
numbers
still
are highly variable because there's 6 different potential stats. You might be going for only
yes.
2 or 3 of those. So even if you get the stats you want, you might not get the element you want.
Exactly, and that's part of the two steps back. It was really kind of like a everyone was just
It feels like a
and
bait and switch, man.
it was kind of a bait and switch because the affinity part wasn't the effects of the affinity wasn't really felt until people started playing. So somebody would get because there's so many things to roll now. It's like, oh, these six perks have to roll high, so I get a lot. So that I can get a lot of max this, max that. but oh hey, wait, it dropped a solar affinity, and now it won't take this perk that I wanted to put into it.
Well, I can tell you that Destiny 2 has certainly nailed making people talk about it sound like giant fucking nerds.
True. I mean, they wanted to do that with Shadowkeep. They said in Shadowkeep they wanted to turn up the RPG elements,
Boy,
and that was
howdy. I
their
don't know what the
solution.
fuck you guys just said, but it really killed any interest I may have had in picking this game up again.
uh, I don't know. I think we'll be able to drag you into it. I'll have to set up a GoFundMe. Buy Destiny for Taylor.
You're going to have to start budgeting my games into the podcast.
Oh boy.
I think we'll just get Matt to cover it. Speaking of Matt, he's gonna be one of the ones playing. I'm hoping that we, as a little community, are gonna jump back into it and come back in a few weeks and talk about it some more. But in the meantime, Will, Taylor, thanks to both you guys for making the time to talk some Destiny today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great having you for the first time, Will. We'll definitely do this again. This is
Perhaps.
been Basementside Chats, y'all. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.
Bye.